Hello, welcome to MJR RPG, a podcast for tabletop role-playing game reviews, replays, and so on and so forth. This is a review for the Call of Cthulhu scenario Endless Light, which is the second entry in Type 40's Seeds of Terror, a series of short one-off scenarios that can be run in 1 to 3 or so hours. You can read the text version of this review over on mjrpg.com. There will also soon be a narrative replay of my run of this scenario in both audio or text form, or if you're listening to this from the future, it's already out there somewhere. The first part of this review is safe for players with minimal spoilers. Midway through, I'll warn off all the sneaky little players and move on to explaining things more thoroughly with suggestions for keepers. In short, Endless Light is an atmospheric, hectic, and cinematic 2 or so hour scenario for any group. It can be run almost straight out of the box with little to no preparation. I highly recommend it for anyone, from first-timers to experienced players, though the keeper should be ready for some improvisation. As with any Seeds of Terror scenario, it is meant to be run with minimal prep and lasting only a few hours. My run of it took only a touch over 2 hours. It is somewhat comparable to Chaosium's beginner scenarios, like the free Lightless Beacon or the Gateways to Terror scenarios, though Endless Light is likely to take a bit longer than those convention-focused 1-hour runtimes, though I think it would be fun to try that with Endless Light, and requires a bit more keeper improvisation due to the shorter but denser page count. I found it easier to run than the first Seed scenario, Pemberley Grange, and I think it could be run after a single read-through without having to prepare much extra. As with most Seed scenarios, Endless Light is location-restricted and time-sensitive. In this case, it is an especially atmospheric location set on a desolate island and ramps up to breakneck speed. This is not a calm investigative session, but a frantic and stressful race to solve or escape its central conflict. The handouts are also beautiful, and all of them are of practical use. The only complaint I may have is that the pre-gen characters are not all that varied, with one engineer and the rest of the characters mostly being variations of gruff sailor, and their backstory sections can be unevenly filled in. Overall, if your group wants a 1 or 2 hour thrill ride of a scenario, this is a good bet and well recommended. I fully plan on running it again and will keep it as a back pocket scenario for a spur-of-the-moment game to whip out on an unplanned game night. If you're a keeper and want to run this for your group, or if you're a player and want to subtly prod your forever GM into running it for you, you can get Endless Light along with the other Seeds of Terror scenarios on DriveThruRPG or Type 40's Patreon. Now, if you are a player, plug your ear holes and or turn off the podcast. But first, if you like what you've heard so far, tell your keeper to listen in, and there are links to grab the scenario in the show notes. On to spoilers. Endless Light can be a frantic scenario, but isn't necessarily a combat or action-focused scenario. There are not that many rolls that must be made at all, besides a handful of dex rolls to avoid falling over, and the always prerequisite sand tests. Otherwise, similar to the previous Seed, the Mummy of Pemberley Grange, the players could potentially solve the scenario very quickly without much in the way of opposition. Simply toss a stick of dynamite down some tunnels, then sit back, kick up your feet, watch the fireworks. Even without much extra input from the keeper, there's plenty to distract the players from that straightforward solution though. In rapid succession, a storm turns into earthquakes, earthquakes turn into worm-like dark crawlers bursting from the ground, deep ones swarm in to hunt the worms, and both worms and fish people trigger sand tests, likely pushing at least one investigator into a bout of madness, if not insanity. And that's just running the scenario word for word without any of your own special surprises tossed in. You can ratchet up the tension by constantly interrupting the group's discussions with descriptions of the horrible sounds of the storm and the hunt, extra earthquakes and dex rolls, maybe the occasional dark crawler squirming into the room or a deep one peeking in on the group. Some good stormy sound effects can also go a long way to really drive home the isolation and hostility of the setting. There is a balancing act, of course, as interrupting the players too much could irritate or paralyze them, while giving them complete free rein deflates the tension and makes it too easy to see the solution to the problem. This shouldn't be much of an issue as long as you keep things moving at a clip, maybe by keeping a specific runtime in mind. I ran it with a 3-hour limit and might have pushed the group a little too hard with the apocalyptic events going on around them, resulting in the game ending at pretty close to the 2-hour mark. But I had a great time, and the players all seemed to enjoy themselves as well. During our run, the players didn't get an immediate sense that destruction of the lighthouse would be that big of an issue, and so very rationally decided to flee. The text does lay out near the end that if the lighthouse is destroyed, it spells the deaths of numerous sailors. If I ran it again, I would add a bit more foreshadowing to the introduction, making it clear that this area of coast is both heavily trafficked and also very dangerous. Maybe something along the lines of, before the lighthouse was set up over a century ago, there were frequent shipwrecks, and if the light were to go out, there would no doubt be scores of lives at risk. The only other large issues that I could see, but which didn't crop up in my game, is if your players are more dungeon crawling or monster hunting inclined, they might be tempted to scour every tunnel and corner of the island on the maps, trying to kill the countless dark crawlers or deep ones. If this did come up, I would ratchet up the earthquakes to make it clear the island didn't have much time left, and certainly not enough time to hunt down every last worm. If that didn't work, a deep one can make short work of an investigator on its own, and even a handful of dark crawlers can mess up someone quickly. Just keep the combat fast, and players should realize quickly, especially as they lack proper weapons, that they are not going to be able to murder their way out of this crisis. I really enjoyed the scenario and very much plan to run it again, adding only the above mentioned foreshadowing. It could also be a wild convention game if run on a strict 1 hour time limit, something I'd very much like to try. Again, you can pick it up at DriveThruRPG individually or as part of a 3-set bundle, or through Type 40's Patreon page. Again, links in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear the full story of my run-through of the game, I will soon have a narrative replay episode of this scenario, as well as a written version if my voice hurts you. I do hope you come back next time for more reviews and replays. Have a good one.